Good afternoon, guys. How are you all doing? It's not the biggest financial services consultancy. Maybe the best, but not the biggest. It is great to be here, and it's actually true. I didn't actually plan a specific speech today, and oh, look, it's me. It's great. Hi. I didn't plan anything specific today because I think the whole topic of creativity and elusiveness, the best way to kind of demonstrate it or talk about it is to actually just come up and speak. For those of you who don't actually know me as a comedian, you should, because I'm really famous. I have 2 videos on YouTube. One of them has 86 views and 93 dislikes. So. No, but it's always good fun. I'm going to tell you guys about maybe a bit of my comedy journey. So I am a stand-up comedian. I'm not a guy that tells, jokes at a bar. I travel, and I literally have that as a hat and a real job. And it's amazing fun. I started my stand-up comedy journey about 3 years ago, actually. I used to be a management consultant, and I remember during my time as a consultant, I was working myself to death. And I got to the point where I had a sabbatical. I needed to take time off work, and then I had a 7-month break from work. And in that time, I was thinking, well, what do I actually want to do with my life? What's my bucket list? And I started to draw up a whole bunch of stuff. And on there was stand-up comedy. And I guess I wanted to do it because a lot of my friends, and if you actually have seen me perform, a lot of my comedy style is not about telling punchlines and jokes. It really is talking about my life and real experiences. And that's the coolest thing with comedy. You're finding the humor in things that you go through every single day, things that are very personal to you. So I did my first open mic night about 3 years ago. And I'll tell you what, I'm not a shy person at all. But comedy was the first time where I got super nervous. I was freaked out because I've never been judged before. I used to be in a band, I used to sing, I used to do a lot of public speaking, but you're not expecting a specific reaction. And that reaction, you can tell how good or bad you are by how audible the audience is. And trust me, we've all planted bombs as comedian, and we've had very, very bad sets and very, very good sets. Every single comedian out there, I can promise you. I remember I went to my first open mic night, and I actually told my first joke, and it hit, and people started laughing. And having never done comedy before, I didn't know that one of the key things was to just shut up and let people laugh. So I started to tell them, I was like, no, I've got another joke. So I started to talk over them and over them. And the owner of the comedy club came up to me at the end of a show and he said, you've got some funny stuff, but can you do something next time? When you come back for your next show and you tell a joke, just pause, right? Just pause, let the audience laugh. So I was like, cool. So I came back the next week, told my first joke, no one laughed, and I was just pausing. Just pausing. I look like the most arrogant comedian in the world. But it's the comedy process. Like, what can I tell you about comedy? Comedy is just like any art form. There's a creativity in it. Comedians, you constantly have to write, to think of new things. It's very different to music, right? I went to see Sting live in concert. I've just revealed my music taste, but Sting. I went to see Sting. I love Sting. I grew up on that kind of stuff. I'm a 80s, 90s, music fan. And I was there, and Sting started playing all his new music. And I'm like, I don't like this crap. And then he played the same songs from 30 years ago that I've heard, 3,000 times. And the whole audience is going ballistic. Everyone's going crazy. As a comedian, if you tell a joke twice, people are like, you suck, man. I heard that before. And it's true. So you constantly are pressured to write. I remember, actually, when I first started comedy, you build up a Rolodex of material, right? It's all the stuff that you go and deliver, and it's stuff you pull out of your pocket, and that's your jokes. And I remember I was doing a show, and there was this crew of Indians that came to one of my shows and listened to stories about my mom. And they were like, buddy, I love the joke, So they brought back... They brought back their friends and came back the next week. And I was like, okay, well, I recognize these guys, so I'm going to change up the material. I'll do another 7 minutes. Then they came back the third week. And I was like, right, I got to do a different 7 minutes. Then I used up my full 20 minutes because I was only about 6 months into comedy. Then they wrote me a message saying, we're going to come back again next week. And I was like, stop coming back. There's so much pressure on me. So I swear to God, I went to get a foot massage before my comedy show, and I just started writing my next 7 minutes. And the massage lady's looking at me going, this guy's really weird, because he's just talking to himself and smiling and whatever. So I did that. I wrote my new 7, and then I came back and I did it. And it's always a risk when you write your new stuff, but it did hit, and I got a good reaction. I was really happy. And then the Indian guy came up to me at the end and goes, buddy, what the hell? I keep coming back. I want to hear about your mom. You keep telling new jokes. Waste of money, waste of time. Sometimes people do want to hear it, right? But then I guess when you tell jokes, one of the things that I guess you do is once you tell a particular joke, in comedy, you call it, you burn it, right? You burn your material. Like I'm sure a lot of you here know Russell Peters, right? Be a man, do the right thing. He can't go up and do that show again. You know, he's used that material. And that's the thing with comedy. You go through and you burn material, and anytime, you know, it's that trade-off. Russell Peters made a name for himself because he had that Be a Man clip. That went viral. I think it got, you know, over 5 million YouTube hits. And as a comic, you know, you can put some material out there and it really helps you get exposure. But you know, once you do that, you can't use that material again. So that's part of the process. The other thing, in addition to writing, and this is the thing you must understand as a comic, is there is no one universal sense of humor in the world. Okay, humor is extremely subjective. I've literally I remember I did a TED Hong Kong 2015 chat. That was amazing. 1,200 or 500 people in the audience. It was booming. It was really, really fun. But no matter how many people are laughing, if you pay enough attention, you'll always see one person in the audience just going. And you need to make sure that that doesn't throw you off. And the trick when you do comedy is you need to just be at ease with the fact that not everyone's going to like your sense of humor. The trick is to win as many people over as possible, and if you can do that, that's great. The other thing is, you're only as good as your last performance, right? You really need to stay humble in this business. It's not something where, you know, I'm very, very grateful. Last week, I won the Hong Kong International Comedy Competition. Thank you. But I'm only as good as my last show, right? That's it. And I swear to gosh, every comedian, we've gone and done a show, and we'll have, like, let's say a tight 8 minutes, and you know it works, and everyone will laugh at it. Then you go do the same show the next night, and no one laughs. And you're sitting there saying, this is the most painful job on earth. And it is, it's brutal. But if you can ride with that and hold that together, I mean, that's what keeps inspiring you to be creative. And especially when you're working a room, and you're seeing some people aren't on side, you have certain themes of material. And if you know things aren't going the right way, shut it down, go a different course, you know? And sometimes bombing is the most fun, you know? You see people not laughing and you're like, well, my mom told me that joke, so I need to write new stuff. But, you know, the other side of it is I do have a day job, right? I run a strategy consulting firm. And in many ways, the creative process applies very much in the same way in my day job as it does in comedy. Because in my day job, so I'm 34 years old, right? To run a strat consulting firm where our clients are all big banks, financial institutions, and generally every person in the meeting room is 10 to 20 years older than me, I gotta be creative around how I convince them that they should hire me or my firm to give them advice about how to run their organization. Management consulting is a very funny profession. I remember when I used to be a management consultant with one of the big firms before, it was, you know, have you heard that saying, a consultant is someone that will steal your watch and then charge you to tell you the time? Yeah, there's a lot of negative stigma around consultants, but it is quite funny because a lot of the time you actually don't know the subject matter. I remember one of the incidences that I ran into is the old firm I worked at was divided in different practice groups, and I was in the corporate and institutional banking practice group. But then a project was sold for a big bank in IT and CRM, customer relationship management strategy, to develop the whole new CRM tool. The partners came to me and said, Ben, all of our IT managers are completely staffed out. can you lead this project? And I was like, I said, look, I have trouble with Google and Facebook, so this is going to be a bit of a disaster. And they said, don't worry, don't worry. Just, you have the lead partner there, you do the strategic thinking around it, and we'll support you with the technicalities. I was like, right. So we flew to the client, and I remember the first meeting. I was walking with the partner, and we're walking to the meeting, and it was with the head of IT, chief technology officer, 15 enterprise architects. I don't even know what these things were. And right before we go in, the partner gets a call, and he's like, yeah. Oh, okay, hold on. Hey, Ben, I got to take this. Can you start the meeting without me? Excuse me? I said, absolutely not. He goes, yeah, you know your stuff. You know your stuff. So he put me in that room, and I just made sure I delayed all the introductions as long as possible. Very nice to meet you. Oh, this is my business card again. Nice to meet you. Went around the table, and I was with one of my consultants with me who also didn't know anything about this subject domain. So we're sitting there, and the first thing is, oh, look, Ben, it's really good to have you here for this project. We know you've got a lot of experience in this area. But before we go and look at the CRM strategy for this bank, can you just give us your 30,000-foot view on some of the key data architecture issues here are at this bank? What? Yeah, and I literally, creativity, right? Thinking on your feet. These are the tricks of a management consultant sometimes. So I said, well, data architecture is a very big term, I can lecture you about it, for hours. Why don't you be a bit more specific and focus on something that maybe I can give you some tangible, tangible advice? So then he starts talking, and the second he starts talking, I lean over to my consultant and I said, give me the client's presentation. So he hands over the client document, and as he's talking, I'm just nodding and yep. And I'm flicking through all the pages, just trying to grab at anything. And eventually I see this thing, Murex 4.1. So he finishes off his sentence and I go, all right, so for example, your Murex platform. And he goes, yep. And I said, I imagine you're operating a 4.1? And he goes, yeah, that's right. I go, have you thought about upgrading to a 4 point? And he's like, 4.2? I go, yeah. One of the guys in the room was like, that's what I said. Wow, this is like disco lighting. This is great. One of the guys was like, this is what I said. And I go, really? Well, you keep going with what you're saying. I literally just worked this room for an hour. Just people constantly making statements and me repeating that statement. That's a great idea. Oh, yeah, I agree with Tim. That's good. John, excellent point of view. I left the meeting, and the head of IT came up to me and said, mate, brilliant. You're a genius. I can't wait to work with you. Yeah, but it's a funny process as a consultant. But when I set up my own firm, I didn't want to create just another strategic consultancy. I wanted to create something that was different. Obviously, we're brand new, and I needed to think of what was fundamentally different about the way we do things. And I think there is a lot of negative stigma because the model or the way that consulting works, in my view, many times is broken. It's broken. If you look at one of the things that consultants do, they do what's called hypothesis-led inductive reasoning. You guys know what that is? They say a hypothesis, and then they're like, well, you should hire me to prove what I just told you. So basically, it's an upfront conclusion. And I think that process is quite flawed. When's the last time you went to the doctor? And I'm in, and he's like, oh, Ben, I think you've got an ovarian cyst. And I'm like, what? And he goes, well, you can hire me, and I'll run through some stuff to prove it. Now, I don't think it works like that at all. Just like you go to a doctor, you'll tell the doctor some of your symptoms, and there's a diagnostics process. And they'll go and investigate that specifically. And once they have the facts, then they can give you a remedy or a cure. And that's the way I look at what my firm does. It's fact-based deductive reasoning. I also think the whole process of consulting is very flawed, right? If you look at something like, can I just get a show of hands, who's interested in like a strategy or management consulting career? Yeah, not after my chat. I can't even see any hands. I don't even know why I asked this question. I'm blind up here. And I'm sure there's someone in the audience going. You have basically the big strategic consultancies, your McKinsey's, Bain's, all of that. One thing that I realized is going in and telling a firm what to do, just like this is what you should do, is not really the best way to do it. Maybe you need to sit down with them and discuss with them in a workshop what they want first. Oh, great. So I said, well, why don't we offer workshops? Next one, then we can do strat consulting after that because we understand what they want a little bit more. What's after that? They need to get a sign-off. They need to get something approved for an internal business case. Well, we can do that too. We've got the tools to do that. We'll do that for you. Next one, they need to execute it. They have their internal team running that. We'll throw some extra bodies at it. Make sure that things get done. How do you track it? They have a finance team to basically look through management reports. Usually it's done very poorly. We can create that for you too. How do you communicate it to your staff? You have town halls, you have your regulators, you have people you need to tell your strategy to. We can create that too. And how do you monetize it? It's basically how do you sell it? How do you basically go to your clients with your pitch and deliver something valuable to them? Again, we can do that too. And it took me 6 months to think through this process to create what was called an end-to-end value chain of consulting services. So basically a one-stop shop solution. And I can promise you going through that kind of process, the creative process, it's something that, you know, if you're waiting around for some creativity to hit you, don't, you know. Creativity, you really gotta push for it, you know. And it doesn't come to you at the most logical times. Some of the best moves or things that have ever happened to me in my life have happened when I'm my lowest or when things are the most difficult. When I started this firm, I had no idea what I was going to do. And again, if I go back to the kind of things that I was looking at, why does the world need one more consulting firm? My value proposition when I created the first slides was terrible. But after a while, you think through it and you say, this is why the world needs one more. And that's a creative process that you go through from start to end. Look, I mean, I think most people here are university students, and you know, you've got amazing things in front of you. What I can tell you right now is I never, ever, ever expected where my life is now to have been exactly where it is. My family motto, and I 100% stand by it, is nothing succeeds as planned. Nothing. And it's all good to have a vision. I agree, it's all good to have goals. But don't think 10, 15 years ahead. You know, try and think every day, what do you basically want to do? And I have a lot of students, like a lot of people, and even executives reach out and say, you know, can I get some career advice? You know, what's your best career advice to me? And I say, there's 3 things, the holy trinity in a career. A lot of people go for money. A lot of people go for money. That's the biggest mistake in the world. I was in jobs where I got paid a lot of money, but I can promise you I wasn't happy. I worked with people who got paid a lot of money. I can promise you they were not happy. The most important things, I can tell you, there's 2 things. 1, do what you like. Do what you like. Find what you really like. Like, I love stand-up. I love it. And the fact that I get paid to tour around and do shows, that is phenomenal. And I keep reminding myself, gosh, you're lucky. You're really lucky. Second one, do what you're good at. Now, this one is where you need a bit more honest self-reflection. There are some people that like, I want to be a comedian. I'm like, don't do that. Of course, there are things you can learn, okay? There are things you can get better at. If you put your mind to it, they said, of course, but find your niches of strength. Find something that you're good at doing. You know, my brother, he is a swimming coach. He used to be a model, and then after that, he basically represented Hong Kong. He was one of the fastest swimmers in Hong Kong, ranked top 100 in the world. And then he set up his swim coaching business. He's very strong at that. My father was a composer. He's very talented, musically minded. That's what he did his whole life. And you know what? If you're good at something, then most of the time you'll like it, right? You'll love it. And if you love something, you'll tend to be better at it. And I promise you, if you get those 2 things right, you'll be the master of what you do, and you can start to charge money for it. And that's when money comes in. Money will come, right? But don't think about that as your first ports of call. My brother, actually, I'm running out of time. My brother he has a very funny job. because when he coaches kids, he works with little children, right? And little kids, I tell you what, they're pretty wild. They're pretty crazy. And he came home one day, and I don't have these kind of stories in my job, and he said, there's this, just true story. He said, there's this little girl, Ben, his name's Jonathan, there's this little 4-year-old girl, and I'm coaching her down in the pool, and her father's in the next lane just doing laps. And she said, Teacher Jonathan, I have a secret. And he's like, yes? She goes, I know the F word. And he's like, oh. 4-year-old. So he's like, you mean like fun? And she goes, no, fuck. And he's like, you shouldn't say that. You know, that's a naughty word. Your daddy will smack your bottom. She goes, no, Teacher Jonathan, he'll smack your bottom. Guys, you have been a really wonderful crowd today. I am out of time, but thank you so much for having me. And my name is Ben Quinlan. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.